Here we are today, and we're going to be doing a preview and pick for the Western Final between the BC Lions and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the CFL, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. A rematch of the Western Final that we saw last season. BC going to be having a different quarterback instead of Rourke. They're going to be having Vern out here, and the Lions end up finishing second in the West yet again, 12-6. Winnipeg went 14-4. So with the crowd obviously being swayed in Winnipeg's favor for them having home game, what are some storylines to talk about heading to IG Field? The first one is what is going on with Winnipeg's injury report. You have seen throughout the week some guys that are relatively big name players having themselves be put on the list. So you have Rasheed Bailey, Nick Dembski, you have Dalton Schoen, and Jackson Jeffcoat listed on this report. This is a little bit concerning. Now, I'm going to be honest, I would imagine that a lot of these guys are going to play. Dalton Schoen is kind of the weird talking point right now where he missed the final 2 games of the regular season. Pretty sure we ended up hearing that he might have ended up missing the rest of the season, including the playoffs. Then out of nowhere, it seemed like no, maybe he has the potential to come back. Either way, you're looking at this recent news and saying, wow, they're out Rasheed Bailey, Nick Dembski, Dalton Schoen, and Jackson Jeffcoat. Those are some big names to really worry about here. Now, I'm going to imagine that some of these guys are all going to play, but I will say with Dembski, guys, coming off of his first 1,000-yard season, and you're looking at a guy like Bailey, he can have an impact for sure. Dalton Schoen, Rookie of the Year last year, a great player. I feel like is continuing to find more momentum in the league. He is just getting started. Looked really good last year. Looked good this year, even though he hasn't really got to play as much. But the point remains that if this does not get sorted out quickly, and you can kind of imagine things are going on in Winnipeg where the trainers are trying to get these guys ready to play, you could be out 3 receivers and a defensive lineman that have all played massive roles for this team in the past few years or recently as last year. So I'm just kind of wondering what things are going to look like. Colaros is probably worried about this as well, as some of his guys that he likes to throw to might be out against a BC team that is looking to get revenge on a early thumping from the beginning of the year. Another talking point is whether or not weather will play an impact here. You have the Lions playing in BC place. They don't play outdoors unless they're on the road. And now, hey, guess what? They're on the road against a team in Winnipeg that has some really rough weather. Will this impact BC, as they're a team that probably would like to play under a roof? So for this game, it looks like the weather will be relatively clear, and Winnipeg doesn't at the moment appear there's going to be any snow, but it's going to be a cold one. Will we see this impact the ability to throw the ball for Vern? Will we see this be a factor in terms of running routes? Will we see a game where Winnipeg forces the Lions to actually make Taquan Mizell end up running the ball a lot? That is something we have to talk about here, because Vern is mobile, but at the same time, they don't want him to take unnecessarily shots. Mizell, I don't believe, has had a crazy high amount of carries in those games against Winnipeg that he's played. I just don't know. There's a lot of factors here, and at the same time, guess what? The other team's got a running back in Brady Oliveira that is a factor, that is coming off of a really good year, that has been good for a while now, and would love to be able to beat up on this BC side and chew clock and get his team closer to a win. Weather probably won't play a factor in terms of ice and snow and stuff like that, but wind and cold will. I imagine Vern will still be able to throw the ball even if it's cold. The biggest problem is how windy will this game be, and who stands to benefit from that more. Normally I'd say BC because Vern is more mobile than Colaros, but Brady Oliveira is just so good you don't really know who has the edge here. And then the final storyline here that I guess you want to talk about is whether or not this game will be seen as the changing of the guard. So let's say that Winnipeg, a team that's been able to go to the Grey Cup so many years in a row now, ends up losing this game. They're another year older with an aging roster that has core guys that are aging on this roster. I'm not saying that they're ancient and they couldn't go back and have another good year this upcoming season, but would we say BC is that team that is on top of the West and should be viewed as the top team in the West going forward? Or would we say, well, we got to wait till next year to see, because Winnipeg may have finished 14-4 this year, but it doesn't look as good as that 15-3 team from last season. They obviously are still a great side, and I will say I expect them to be in contention for the Grey Cup, but with the Lions having some younger guys that could play an impact, how are we going to look at all this when it's all said and done? Probably the score will, shape that storyline a little bit, but if BC wins big, do we say, oh, Winnipeg's got a lot of work to do this offseason to get back to trying to win the Grey Cup? So what are my thoughts on this game? I think it's going to depend on a lot of factors. Injury here is going to play a factor. Ben Halodic, the Lions linebacker, is not reportedly going to be playing in this game. That is unfortunate, and there's injuries already that I mentioned on the other side that will play a huge role in what we've seen here. I do want to say the game that Winnipeg ended up beating BC really badly, while the defense looked really bad, the offense didn't look great either. That was when Dane was out there earlier in the year. They did win 30-6. I don't know what kind of game we're going to be getting with these two sides. I don't think we're going to see a game where the Bombers end up just blowing them out by 28 points at the half. However, I don't really know if we're at a point where we're going to see BC win this game by 24 points like they did earlier in the year. Not saying that it's going to be a one-score game the whole time, but I do think that it won't be as big of a lead, if you want to say that. That being said, I will say the opening quarter of this game probably decides how it goes. If Winnipeg's able to find the deep ball, I'm going to say that this game is over. If BC is able to keep them at bay or keep them where they're not able to strike with those big strikes like they did in that second game of the year that they met, then I will say they'll find their groove a little bit more, and this game should be very interesting. So who am I picking to go to the Grey Cup? To be honest, as much as I want to say the Lions, I am picking Winnipeg here. They've got the experience, they've been able to do it, and they are still hungry. Yes, the Lions are very hungry as a team that lost to Winnipeg last year when they could have went to the Grey Cup, but the Bombers have been able to taste a championship, not just one, but two, and they lost last year in heartbreaking fashion when they realistically probably could have had that three-peat. Well, they realistically should have, and now they want to get back. I do think that the Lions are in a spot where they could win, but the Bombers have been more consistent, if you will, compared to BC. We talked about how they started off the year really hot. Then we talked about, well, they weren't as good of a team when they played teams like Hamilton, and those teams started to beat them by a good amount. And then they started to get where they got better towards the end of the year. I don't know what's going to happen here. Is Vern going to have a good game like he did last week? If that's the case, then BC is winning this game. Will we see a shootout? That also remains to be seen, as this Lions defense has to step up in this game. They're facing one of the best teams in the league, and a team that ended up having the highest points per game total at the end of the year. So picking Winnipeg, want BC, but if Winnipeg wins again, I will live. So anyway, what are your thoughts for this game? Let me know who you're picking down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Check out my other preview for the Toronto-Montreal game. So everybody, please make sure to stay safe and have a great night.